Travel Thru Grief. I have good news for you all. Today is National Leave the Office Early Day. This is Travel Thru Grief, and I am Ellen Beckemeyer. I am your host. There is a very specific feeling that happens when you go to lunch and quietly realize you are not going back to the office for the rest of the day. Not because something went wrong, not because you're sick, not even because you have an appointment you forgot about. You simply decided intentionally to take the afternoon off. And honestly, I think more people need to do that. Not recklessly, not irresponsibly, not to avoid life, but to reconnect with it. You see, National Leave the Office Early Day is observed every year on June 2nd, and it was created by productivity expert Laura Stack. She wanted to encourage healthier work-life balance. And she also wanted to reduce burnout for people who work far beyond normal hours. Now, honestly, I think this conversation has only become important with time. Because modern life is exhausting, not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. People are just dang overwhelmed. They're overstimulated, constantly connected. Their phones follow them everywhere. Work follows you home. Stress follows you into bed. Even moments that are supposed to feel restful often become multitasking sessions disguised as relaxation. And somewhere in all of that, many adults quietly stop feeling like people and start feeling like operating systems. Wake up, work, answer the messages, handle the problems, run the errands, pay the bills, repeat. And after a while, life can become incredibly functional while also becoming emotionally flat. Especially for people carrying grief, especially caregivers, especially people who spent years putting everybody else first. At some point, many people stop living inside their lives and start administrating them. That is why intentional restoration matters. Not after burnout destroys you, before that. I remember hearing a story for someone who worked in a high-pressure office where staying late had quietly become part of the culture. Everyone was exhausted all the time, but nobody wanted to admit it because exhaustion somehow became tied to importance. One summer afternoon, a group of coworkers went out to lunch together. They just sat outside on a patio. The weather was beautiful. Nobody was rushing. Somebody ordered another iced tea. Somebody else ordered dessert. And eventually one person laughed and said, "What if we just don't go back today? Not forever, just for the afternoon." And suddenly everybody relaxed. Really relaxed. The conversation shifted away from deadlines and performance reviews and moved into real life. One person admitted they had not taken a true vacation in almost 2 years. Another said they barely saw their kids except for rushed evenings before bedtime. Another confessed they felt so burned out that they could not think creatively anymore. And what struck me about that story was not that they skipped work. It is how quickly everybody became human again once the pressure was lifted. You could almost feel their nervous systems unclench. I think many people underestimate how powerful that is, because burnout is not only working too hard, it is also the loss of spaciousness, the loss of joy, curiosity, wandering, feeling emotionally present inside your own life while you are living it. You know, there is a reason executives probably cough. There is a reason networking lunches become 3-hour conversations. There is a reason conferences build entire schedules around dinners, cocktail hours, and retreats. You see, humans begin thinking differently when relaxed. Your ideas need oxygen. Relationships just deepen when nobody is rushing. Some of the best conversations in life happen after the official meeting ends. We used to joke at church that we always had a parking lot meeting right after the other meeting. Walking back to the car, sitting outside after lunch, taking the scenic route somewhere. Lingering long enough for the real conversation to begin after the polite conversation ends. And honestly, ordinary people deserve that too. Not because they're wealthy, but because they are human. I think one of the saddest things about modern adulthood is how guilty people feel for enjoying themselves without earning it through exhaustion first. Even rest becomes productive now. People optimize sleep, workouts, vacations, hobbies. Everything becomes another performance metric. But restoration is not a reward for collapse. Restoration is the maintenance for the human spirit. There is a difference between avoidance and restoration. Avoidance ignores life. Restoration supports your ability to return to life. That distinction matters. Because taking an intentional afternoon off is not abandoning your responsibility. What it is recognizing you are more than your responsibilities. I love the idea of a you appointment, not a dentist appointment, not an oil change, not another errand disguised as self-care, but an actual appointment with your own humanity. Maybe you leave work early and finally take the fitness class you keep talking about trying. Yoga, cycling, dance, water aerobics. Maybe strength training in the middle of the afternoon before the gym becomes crowded and rushed. Exercise has long been connected to stress reduction, emotional regulation, and improved mental clarity. But honestly, I think movement also reconnects people to themselves in ways words sometimes cannot, especially after grief, especially after the emotional compression. Movement reminds the body it is still alive. And maybe your intentional afternoon is quieter than that. Maybe you go home, open the windows, put some music on, and clear your space. Not because you're trying to become perfect, but because clutter can quietly hold emotional tension too. There is something deeply soothing about resetting your environment when life feels mentally noisy. Putting on those fresh sheets, the cleared kitchen counter, sunlight coming through some clean windows. It is springtime, y'all. Laundry folded while music plays softly in the background. Not because cleaning solves grief or stress, but because peaceful environments support peaceful nervous systems. Sometimes restoration looks surprisingly ordinary, and that does not make it less meaningful. Maybe your afternoon off becomes the day you reconnect with a part of yourself that has gone quiet. Maybe you finally take that pottery class or learn pickleball. Maybe this is a good time to start that garden. Maybe you buy a beginner watercolor set, even though you have not painted since high school. Maybe you take a cooking class or a photography workshop. Maybe you decide to become the kind of person who spends Saturday mornings learning how to bake bread or identify birds at the park. And honestly, hobbies matter more than people realize. Think about the pandemic. Everybody started picking up a hobby. Because hobbies remind us we are more than workers, caregivers, problem solvers, and stress managers. We are still people capable of curiosity, joy, learning, play. One of the hardest things about grief and burnout is that they slowly strip life down to necessity. Everything becomes practical, efficient, useful. And over time, people stop feeling like themselves without fully understanding why. Sometimes the answer is not a massive life overhaul. Sometimes it is reconnecting with one small thing that makes you feel awake again. I also love the idea of what I call an adrenaline mini adventure. Not reckless, not dangerous, just something new, something novel. There was a study published in the Journal of Positive Psychology that found trying new experiences can increase happiness and life satisfaction. And honestly, I believe that. Novelty wakes us up. Maybe your mini adventure is kayaking for the first time or ziplining. Maybe it's just driving to a nearby town you've never explored before, or taking that dance lesson. Maybe it's trying paddleboarding or hiking. Sometimes people think healing must always be serious, but lightness matters too. Play, joy, not because grief disappears, but because you are still alive alongside your grief. And your nervous system needs experiences that remind you life is not only obligation and endurance. Sometimes taking the afternoon off is not even about rest. Sometimes it is about contribution. Maybe you tell your employer you want to participate in a volunteer opportunity. Maybe you want to take that time off so you can help in a food bank or spend the afternoon in an animal shelter walking dogs. Maybe you help with a community cleanup or a garden project. Maybe you mentor students or pack meals to deliver supplies somewhere. And honestly, many employers are surprisingly supportive of those opportunities because they understand something important. People who feel connected to meaning often return more energized, creative, and emotionally healthy. One of the things grief can quietly do is make life feel smaller and more isolated. And one of the things service can do is reconnect us to humanity again. Not because volunteering magically erases pain, but because meaning matters. The connection, feeling useful in a life-giving way. Sometimes helping someone else reminds us that we are still part of the world too. And honestly, one of the most meaningful reasons to leave the office early is to reconnect with people you love before life becomes nothing but logistics. I think one of the quiet tragedies of adulthood is how easily relationships just drift into maintenance mode. Everybody's always tired. They're busy. People text updates instead of having conversations. Schedules replace presence, and before you know it, months have passed. So maybe your intentional afternoon means surprising your spouse with an early dinner while both of you still have energy to actually talk. Maybe it means calling a friend and saying, "Hey, are you free this afternoon?" Maybe it means visiting your parents. Maybe it means picking up your grandchild from school just because. Maybe it means sitting on a patio with someone you love while the afternoon slowly turns into evening. And honestly, some of the best conversations in life happen during unexpected ordinary afternoons. Not on birthdays, not on holidays, just a regular old Tuesday. Coffee turning into dinner, a walk turning into honesty, a drive where somebody finally opens up. A long laugh that makes you momentarily forget how heavy life has felt lately. One of the things grief teaches people very clearly is that time with others is not unlimited. Sometimes we would give almost anything for one more ordinary afternoon with certain people. One more lunch, one more drive, one more conversation. And that perspective changes how intentional we become about connection while we still can. I once knew a woman who intentionally scheduled one afternoon off every single month, no matter how busy life became. She protected it like an important meeting. Sometimes she wandered bookstores for hours. Sometimes she drove to another town and explored antique shops. Sometimes she just sat in a coffee shop reading. She went to museums, or she just did absolutely nothing productive at all. And she once said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said, "If I don't choose pauses for myself, eventually my body chooses them for me." That is wisdom, because eventually exhaustion sends an invoice, maybe through anxiety, emotional numbness, resentment, burnout, and what we don't want is through a heart attack or a stroke. And honestly, many people are more depleted than they realize because they have lived in survival mode for so long. The constant pressure just feels normal now, and culture let that happen. But normal and healthy are not always the same thing. I think there is also something deeply healing about seeing the world during hours we normally rush through. The middle of the afternoon has its own atmosphere. The lunch rush fades, bookstores become quieter, sunlight moves differently across buildings. But you see the retired couples, they linger over the coffee. People walk dogs slowly instead of rushing them. The world just softens a little. And suddenly you realize life has been unfolding around you all day long while you sat inside answering emails that probably will not matter 6 months from now. That awareness can feel emotional sometimes, because somewhere deep down, part of you remembers you want more life than survival mode allows. And honestly, that realization is healthy, not selfish, healthy. So maybe sometime this summer you intentionally take the afternoon off. Not because life is falling apart, but before it does. Maybe you go to lunch and stay longer. Maybe you try something new. Maybe you just reconnect with someone you love. Volunteer, clean your space, and clear your mind. Maybe you finally sign up for that class you keep saying you want to try. Maybe you can just simply sit outside and breathe without multitasking for an hour. Not because you're lazy, but because you are alive. And a sustainable life requires more than endurance. It requires restoration too. I want to thank you for spending this time with me today. This is Travel Thru Grief. And maybe this week you make a you appointment. Not to escape your life, but to reconnect with it. So until next time, keep finding your way forward. If this episode connected with you, I'd love for you to follow our podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who may need it. Those small actions truly help new podcasts like Travel Thru Grief grow and reach more people. And thank you to everyone who has already listened, rated, reviewed, and supported this journey. I appreciate you more than you know. Until next time, keep finding your way forward.